Have you ever wondered about the intricacies of the Citizenship Amendment Act in India? Why is it a subject of controversy? Today we'll unravel the complexities of this legislation, otherwise known as the CAA, and its intended purpose. We'll also discuss the Indian Union Muslim League's petition against the CAA, which they argue is a violation of the Indian Constitution. So, buckle up as we delve deeper into the IUML's objections and explore the journey from the filing of the petition to the scheduled final hearing. The IUML's petition marked the beginning of a legal battle against the CAA. The Indian Union Muslim League, or IUML, took a stand against the Citizenship Amendment Act, filing a petition in the Indian Supreme Court. But what was their argument? They contended that the CAA was in fact unconstitutional. At the heart of their case was Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees equality before the law. The IUML argued that the CAA's classification of 3 neighboring countries and non-Muslim migrants for citizenship was a violation of this very principle. They pointed out that the act was discriminatory, excluding Muslims and favoring non-Muslim migrants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. This, the IUML argued, was a clear breach of the equality guaranteed under Article 14. The government, on the other hand, justified the exclusion by claiming to protect persecuted minorities from these countries. However, the IUML contended that this justification was flawed, as it indirectly discriminated against Muslims. The petition filed by the IUML opened a legal Pandora's box, prompting over 250 other petitions against the CAA. These petitions came from every corner, including other political parties and politicians, each echoing the IUML's concerns of religious discrimination. The Supreme Court's final decision will be the deciding factor on whether the CAA is constitutionally valid or arbitrary. It will have to consider both the government's reasoning and the IUML's arguments. The IUML's move sparked a wave of petitions against the CAA. The IUML's petition was not alone. Over 250 petitions against the CAA flooded the Supreme Court. From political parties to individual politicians, a wave of dissent rose against the act. The sheer volume of these petitions painted a vivid picture of a nation divided, a populace wrestling with the question of what it means to be a citizen of India. At the same time, the international media turned their attention towards India. Outlets from around the globe, including Al Jazeera, started scrutinizing the CAA. They cast a critical eye over the legislation, examining its potential implications for the Muslim community. The narrative they presented was that of an act with an anti-Muslim bias. Despite the Indian government's assertion that the CAA was designed to grant citizenship, not to deny it, the international media's portrayal echoed the concerns of those who opposed the act. The IUML's argument that the CAA violated the principle of equality enshrined in Article 14 of the Indian Constitution resonated with many. This principle, guaranteeing equality before the law, was being questioned. Was the classification of 3 neighboring countries and the exclusion of non-Muslim migrants for citizenship in line with this principle? Or was it discriminatory, as the IUML argued? The government's justification for excluding certain countries from the CAA, that it aimed to protect persecuted minorities, was also put under the microscope. But could this argument stand when the act appeared to discriminate against Muslims? This question was at the heart of the IUML's petition and many others. The Supreme Court was now faced with a monumental task. It had to navigate the complexities of the arguments presented, weigh the government's reasoning against the concerns of the IUML and others, and ultimately decide whether the CAA was constitutionally valid or arbitrary. The wave of petitions and the international media attention had set the stage for a crucial decision that would shape the future of India's citizenship laws. With the final hearing scheduled for December 2022, the Supreme Court stands at the crossroads of a major decision. This case is not just about the Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, but it's also about the very fabric of our Constitution and the values it upholds. The Supreme Court, the guardian of our Constitution, has the pivotal task of examining the constitutional validity of the CAA. The central question that needs to be addressed is whether the act, by classifying citizens based on their religion, violates Article 14, which guarantees equality before the law. The Indian Union Muslim League, along with over 250 other petitioners, argue that it does. They assert that by excluding Muslims from the provisions of the Act, the government is discriminating on the grounds of religion. If the court agrees with this argument, it could rule that the CAA is unconstitutional. On the other hand, the government justifies the Act by stating that it is intended to protect persecuted minorities from 3 neighboring countries. The court will have to scrutinize this claim and determine whether it stands up to constitutional scrutiny. The government's reasoning will be weighed against the IUML's arguments and those of the other petitioners. The Supreme Court's final decision will be a defining moment for the nation. It will determine whether the CAA, a legislation that has stirred controversy and sparked protests, is constitutionally valid or arbitrary. The court's decision will not only impact the lives of millions of people, but it will also set a precedent for future laws and policies. It will send a message about the kind of nation we are and the values we stand for. As the date of the final hearing approaches, anticipation builds. This case has captured the attention of the nation and the world. The stakes are high and the implications are far-reaching. It's a decision that will shape the course of our democracy and define the contours of our constitutional rights. The nation waits with bated breath for the final hearing. As the legal proceedings continue, the streets of India echo with protests. The Citizenship Amendment Act, or CAA, has stirred up a storm of controversy and drawn the nation's attention to the heart of our democratic principles. From the bustling streets of Assam to the vibrant cityscape of Delhi, voices rise in unison against the CAA. The Indian Union Muslim League's petition against the CAA has not only reverberated in the hallowed halls of the Supreme Court, but has also echoed in the public squares and social media platforms. The IUML's call for a religion-neutral law is a significant part of this uproar. The plea for equality, for the fundamental right to be treated the same regardless of one's faith, is a cornerstone of their argument. In the midst of this uproar, the IUML's call for a religion-neutral law has struck a chord. The notion of a law that does not discriminate based on religion is not just an ideal, it's a necessity in a country as diverse as India. It's not just about the Muslim community, it's about every individual who calls this country home, irrespective of their religious beliefs. The IUML's stance has sparked conversations about the nature of citizenship, about who gets to be Indian, and how that is decided. It has challenged the nation to question the very fabric of our constitution and our understanding of equality and justice. Protests have been witnessed not only in Assam but also in other parts of India. They reverberate with the same demand for a law that is neutral, inclusive and fair. The cry for a religion-neutral law is not just a political demand, it's a call for justice, for equality, for the very principles that form the bedrock of our democracy. It's a call that has been echoed by various groups, political parties and individuals reflecting a shared concern about religious discrimination and the need for a religion-neutral law. While the Supreme Court's final decision is yet to come, these protests and calls for a religion-neutral law underscore the urgency and importance of the issue at hand. The unrest and anticipation build as the date of the final hearing approaches. The Citizenship Amendment Act, a subject of heated debates, legal battles and street protests, remains a pressing issue in India. We've journeyed from the moment the Indian Union Muslim League filed a petition against the Citizenship Amendment Act right up to the doorstep of the final hearing. This legal battle, accompanied by the watchful eyes of international media and the voices of the Indian public, has brought us to a pivotal point in India's legal and social history. The IUML, along with other political parties, politicians and citizens, has challenged the constitutionality of the CAA. They argue that it violates Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees equality before the law. The CAA's classification of 3 neighboring countries and non-Muslim migrants for citizenship, they contend, discriminates against Muslims. The government, on the other hand, justifies this exclusion, claiming it aims to protect persecuted minorities. This tug-of-war between the government's reasoning and the IUML's arguments will ultimately be resolved in the Supreme Court. The final hearing, scheduled for December 2022, is a landmark event that will determine whether the CAA is constitutionally valid or arbitrary. Beyond the courtroom, the CAA has sparked protests in Assam and other parts of India. These protests, coupled with the IUML's petition, highlight the need for a religion-neutral law. They demonstrate the concerns of various groups about religious discrimination and the potential for the CAA to create a divided society. The Supreme Court's final decision will not only determine the fate of the CAA, but will also set a precedent for future laws that touch upon matters of citizenship and equality. It could potentially reshape the interpretation and application of Article 14, impacting how we understand equality before the law in India. As we await the final hearing, the question remains, will the CAA stand the test of constitutionality?